I send you some readings. One of the things of the course is that you're going to be reading a lot, okay? And it is important that you read for two reasons. One of them is people who read normally will be passing the course. People who don't normally will be failing the course. Second thing, which is very important, is by reading you will be able to think about what kind of questions you would like to discuss in class. And this is a very important thing for this seminar. I'm going to be handling the course as a seminar. This is not a teaching course, okay? This is a seminar. And what I will be expecting from you is to ask questions, to get engaged in discussion, to think seriously about what is that we are learning and why is this important for what I'm going to be doing in the future, okay? That's going to be very important. So I need you to really engage in discussion during the course. Reading the material that I will be sending to you will help you make those questions. But there has to be questions that you find important for the work you're going to be doing in the future. That's very important, okay? One of the things I find whenever I'm teaching is students come, take a course, but they really don't relate what they are learning in the course to what they may be doing in life later on. And it is important that you do that because you are already in semesters which are getting you close to working in real life, okay? So feel about that. This is going to be a dialogue, a debate type of course, okay? So speaking is important. Talking, getting into the discussion. What we're going to be talking in general is what is the meaning of international trade agreements? What are these things called trade agreements? Why are they needed? Why are they important when we look at the situation of the world today? And so what I did in the course, I divide the course in several sections. The first section is really kind of an introductory section to remember a few of the things that you should have learned before about what is going to be happening in the world because we have trade happening in the world. So one of the key issues that you should be thinking about is globalization. What is the meaning of globalization? What do we mean by globalization?
The exchange of cultures, trade, information.
So the key question for you and for me is, okay, this thing about globalization, is it really new?
No.
Why? If you say no, you have to say why.
Because, for example, when it was when Spain conquered Mexico, they explored like minerals and export them to Spain and so I think that
Let me close the door, it was making noise.
That is like globalization. Not all, but it's like an example, and it's a long time ago.
So globalization doesn't necessarily happen in the 20th century. Do they agree with everybody? This is the kind of course it's going to be. Yes or no?
Yeah, but it's globalization since we can travel easily to another country.
Okay, so what is the difference between the feeling of globalization in the 20th century and 21st century and the globalization that we were talking about a little while ago? You were saying, what? Your first thing was what? Why is it different this time?
That now it's easy to get into another country.
Whereas before it would take several months for the Spaniards to know what we were doing in Mexico. Today, we know what's happening in China.
Everywhere.
So what's happening in Beijing right now? What do you mean you don't know? What's happening in Beijing today? What's the biggest news coming out of Beijing today?
They are building something right now in precision, right? The biggest.
They always start building something in China. But it's basically right now what's happening. No? Okay? No? Nobody here, no? International business students, they have no idea what's going on right now. Who's studying international business here? All of us. So the big thing is, we have a steam pollution in Beijing right now. You didn't read that? You never read newspapers? You only read what? What specifically do you read? How do you know what's happening in the world? Who won the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor? Who? No one else? Are you serious? No, come on. Okay. What is one of the most important things of globalization? You said the easiness of communication. Yeah? The way that we can travel, the mobility that is created in the world. And the difference between today and the Spaniards at the time of the conquest was they didn't really know what was happening in Mexico until 2 or 3 months later. And whenever you send something to that country, it will take a long, long time to get there. So what we are doing is not new. Trade has been there ever since the beginning. But the one thing that you know that we all of us know is the situation right now is different because we can get instant communication. So technology has made a big difference in the world, okay? And the biggest difference between the world today and the world 300 years ago is not that trade didn't happen. Trade always happened between nations. The big difference is we know almost instantly right now, okay? We know what is happening right now in the financial centers of Europe. So one of the key questions for you and your company is going to be, what's happening in Europe right now? How's business going in Europe right now? What's happening to the exchange, to the trade, to the markets in Europe today? Why is it important to Mexico? Do we care what's happening right now in France? Do we care what's happening right now in Germany? Why?
Because if you don't know what's happening in the other countries, you cannot know how your business is going to.
So you will be expecting effects, impacts from whatever is happening somewhere else into your economy right now. So the interrelation is really a big difference. It's not that we didn't have trade before. It's the fact of technology making a big difference in the way that everything affects. And the impact of a crisis, a financial crisis in Europe, will have some say and some impact in Mexico today. But in addition, if we open our economy and we trade with many countries in the world, what happens in another country will immediately have an impact on our country because we are now related, interrelated in trade with those countries. Okay? So that's a big important issue. That's the reason why there's something that we need there. And that's what we're really looking at right now. So let's see what happens. Maybe we should turn the lights off. Is it okay if we turn the lights off? Thank you very much. Is it Oscar? Yeah.
Oscar.
Okay, thank you. So let's see something that's very important. Look what's happening to the world right now, okay? When we look at the population of the world and the projected population of the world as it is growing right now in the year 2020, one of the things that we can see right now is what is going to happen in terms of the mix of people in the world. And the first thing that we can see very clearly is 56 of the 100 people that we take as the idea of percentage, 56 of them are going to be in one region called Asia. Okay? Remember, this is the year 2013, okay? So when we look 7 years ahead of us, what we are projecting is an incredible thing. 56 of the people of the world will be in one particular region called Asia. So one interesting question for you would be, what was the composition of the world in the year 1492?
Mostly in Europe.
That's what people would expect, and yet it's not true. Okay? So it's very interesting to see that, because one of the things I had to look, there is a book that I am not reading, my wife is reading, so as you can imagine, she keeps telling me all the stories. It's a book called 1493 that you may want to read, and it gives an idea of how was the world in the year 1493, and it's also another one called 1491, which is the one that he started publishing first. And what he does in those books, according to my wife, I haven't read it, is that it will give you a glimpse of what's happening in the world in the year 1491. And many of the things that this guy is putting in his book will be amazing for you. because what it gives you is a completely different picture from the one that mentally we have, okay? We mentally have a picture of Mexico City at the time of the Spaniard Virreinato. And what will happen at that time? Everybody will expect Mexico City to be like what? How do you think Mexico City in the year 1580? How will you expect? Think about it. How do you imagine that city? Forget about how it will be running in terms of people.
I think since it was the main city in Mexico already, I think it would be developed for that time, in my opinion.
Okay, how many black people you would expect it to be in that city? That city, 1528, 1540, 1560.
Few.
Very few.
Yes,
How many Chinese?
almost none.
No. How many of us are in agreement with that? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're all wrong, okay? There were more Chinese than any other people at the time in the mix of population. And the reason was very clear. As trade happened between Europe through Mexico to Asia, the Chinese were the first people that really came with all these now boats, you know, the boats that went all the way to China. So it's quite interesting to figure out, you know, that many misconceptions arise from the fact that we really have not understood one thing which is crucial. The 21st century is completely different to the 16th century. And many of the things that we take for granted today, and we really, as these guys are saying, they telescope our image to the past, simply do not represent anything that will be seen there. Same way, when you're looking at the future, you have to think and change the way that you're looking at things. The first thing that you will have to learn is Asia is going to be an important region for anyone who wants to get involved in international business. And the reason why it's going to become an important region is very clear. Simply because they are growing very fast in population, and as they grow faster and faster and faster in population, what they will be is they will be the major market for the world. Okay? So one of the things that we are seeing right now is 56 of the 100 people representative of the world will be in Asia, and of those, 19 will be Chinese, 17 will be from India. So what are the countries that we should be looking at in the future? Well, it's very clear. China, India. Why? Simply because of the sheer size of the population. There's nothing else, but this is important. This is going to be the area where population will be staying. 16 will be from Africa. Okay? $13 will be in the Américas, as we call it. Okay? And this is important. And then 7 will be from Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, 5 will be from Western Europe, 3 will be from the Middle East. If we look at the world in the year 2020 and we keep projecting even farther, what we will be realizing is whatever life you are going to have is going to be an Asian life. Okay? So there is a job in the financial community going out who says, you are working in a financial firm right now in England, or you are working in a financial firm in New York, and the question that will be asked to you is, Shanghai or goodbye? Either you go to work Shanghai, or you're going to be out of the company. Because what's happening is more and more, the financial weight of the world is shifting towards Singapore, Hong Kong, China. Yes?
I have a question. Why is the Middle East so low represented? Because I think because of their religion, they have more children than they do in Asia, for instance, in China.
Except, many of us think that the Muslim world, which is really what we're saying, okay? The religion is the Muslim world, will be this part of the world. And the answer is no. The biggest countries in the Muslim world are the following: Indonesia, Malaysia, India. And so if they keep reproducing themselves because of their religion, as you're saying, the way that they do, the countries that are really growing very fast are Indonesia, are Malaysia, are India. India has a huge, huge Muslim population. Okay? Remember, India must be right now about 1.3 billion people. Out of those 1.3 billion people, probably 300 are Muslims. And so one of the things that you have to realize is India, Bangladesh, then you have Pakistan, and all of those are not considered Middle East. Okay? That's everything. And really basically what we're talking about the Middle East countries is the Arab countries. Okay? So one of these things that we have to make is this difference. And understand that, in fact, when we're talking about the Muslim world, the biggest part of the Muslim world is really in Asia, South Asia, East Asia. And why is the Middle East going to be important in the future?
Because of oil?
Yeah, but what does oil bring?
Investment?
Specifically, how do you prove that? Investment, what would you call it? If I get oil and a small population, and the oil is giving me a lot of money, I end up with a lot of wealth. Yeah, because what I'm going to be is going to be one of the strongest financial centers in the world. Because what's happening is more and more, the accumulation of money through the sales of oil in a country that do not spend the money because they don't have the large population that other countries have, implies that they have surplus of finance. And therefore, what you will see this region more and more is becoming important for financial purposes. How do you know that? You know that because you have a lot of what's called now sovereign funds. One of the most important is one of the United Arab countries. Okay? So one of the biggest things that you will be seeing also in the shift is big markets in Asia, big financial capacity in the Middle East. So yes, Shanghai is going to be important, but maybe you will end up in United Arab Emirates rather than in Asia. Now that's going to be a little bit of a trouble for people who are female, because the culture and the conditions of life in those countries for females is going to be different in other places. And that's another interesting fact of what we tend to call Muslim. One of the things you're going to be facing is, if you go to a country like Indonesia, you will find a very open society, even though it is Muslim in its majority. So, that's not for this course, but one thing that's very interesting is, please don't lump together Muslims as if they were all the same way. Just like Catholics are not the same, okay? I'm assuming that you are at least Catholic in principle, okay? Why? Because we were baptized normally in our family. But we are different in terms of how we learn and do our own religious life. Well, the same thing happens on the Muslims, okay? They are not all people that will fail you and do this and that. It's quite interesting. You should travel through those areas that are very interesting. I've been there, it's fun. First question then, as we look at the population of the world, we see this growth and we see this changing aspect of what would be, in my opinion, consumption markets. But as we look at the supermarket of one country called the United States, and we walk into any typical supermarket in the United States, you will find the following composition on a trip to the grocery store. You will go there and you will find apples which are not from the United States and from New Zealand. You will go there and you find apricots which are not from there but from China. You will go and you find bananas which are coming from Ecuador or Mexico or any other place. And as you look at this list of things that you enjoy eating, and that you will find it very easily in a supermarket here in Mexico or in the United States, you realize that many of the products that you have there are not being produced in the country. So two things are happening in the world, yes. One of them is consumption patterns and consumption areas are changing very quickly. And the second thing is, you cannot say anymore that what you are consuming in your own country is being produced in your own country. This is globalization in terms of supermarket activity. Yeah.
For example, you are saying that the consumer market size is the most important thing to consider for.
In the future.
Well, for example, what about, I don't know, language, cultural similitude? I think that is also very important. For example, Mexico might have more trade with a country that has a smaller consumer market, but with more things in common.
And that would be an important aspect to take a look at, yeah? One of the things they would have to say is, when I'm talking about export diversification in country, let's take Mexico. We have been discussing export diversification for the past 20 years, okay? And what we keep telling people is, look, I mean, we are too dependent on the American market, and therefore we should diversify our exports. There are two ways of diversifying your exports, yeah? One of them is saying, I look for other markets, meaning I go for other countries, and I will be trying to export to other countries. Okay, if you do that, that's one way of export diversification. But which one is the other one? Same market, what can I diversify there?
Luxury goods?
Yeah. Meaning, I don't have to look at other markets necessarily. One of the things that I may be looking at is what is being sold in that market that I know very well, that I can substitute for with Mexican produce. Okay? And so the key question that you're asking is exactly that, is do I really need to move outside those markets? Do I really need to go to this market? Or do my products have a better chance of being successful in smaller markets? That's fine. Still represents a strategy of business. What you have to do, you have to define your business strategy. But the key question that you have to take into account, and we're going to go back to that later on, is you have to go back to the fact of two things. The first one is markets are shifting and changing, and therefore consumer tastes must be changing. And the second thing is I get competition in my market from all over the world. When we talk about the globalized economy, we have to understand that it's not only that I can go to the outside world, it's that the outside world can come to my country. Okay? And once I open my economy, it's not only that I can find markets somewhere else, it's also that somebody from outside my country can find my market attractive. And if they do that, this is going to be a typical supermarket, grocery store choice of products. They're coming from all over the world. So if I'm an apple producer of the United States, I understand then that New Zealand, which is really at the end of the world, okay, is a competitor. That's globalization, that's the change, that's what we're talking about, okay? It's the fact that technology has allowed us to really bring the products from faraway places into my own market without losing its characteristics. So in the past, if I only ship you apples, and it takes 3 months to get to the place where I am going to be selling them, I might think carefully whether those apples are still going to be edible at the time that they show me market. Okay? All right? Okay. So first thing, we are shifting. Trade is there, globalization exists. And therefore what I have here is what's happening in terms of the globalization process. There are two things that are very interesting. One of them is the dominance of one country, the United States, in terms of the weight for the world trade. And the second thing is the fact that the middle class is driving the increasing consumption in the world. So one of the key things that we should be thinking as a country, and that's a different course also, is how can I really manage to create a middle class in Mexico will be very important. Because if I can create a middle class in Mexico, I will be increasing the market for products in Mexico. Because it is the middle class that will be consuming more and more and more over time. What is happening in the world? The first thing that's happened is the global economy has grown to rely heavily on middle class consumption. Thanks to long-term downward trend in personal savings rates from 10% in the early 80s to approximately 0 by 2007, the growth of US consumption has been faster than the growth of the GDP, making it a driver for both US and global economies. At $10 trillion, US private consumption accounts for just under 1/5 of the world economy. This is the importance of the United States, okay? In fact, as the source of demand is twice the size of the next largest entire economy, Japan, in the world. Two things. One of them is middle class. Second thing is the weight of the American consumer in the world. Think telescoping this. If all of a sudden we have the Chinese population reaching the level of middle income class a la United States. Okay, the United States about 300 million people, China about 1.5 billion people, 5 times. If the United States represents 20%, 1/5 of the total demand in the world, all of a sudden we're going to have 5 United States. That's 100%. Oof, now I have 125 and demand of 100. What do we do then? This is one of the key questions that you have to ask yourselves as business people, okay? As you have these people coming into the market and demanding products, as they really join the middle class and therefore the consuming population of the world, what you will see is tremendous increase in demand in many products compared to what they were before the demand. As demand increases in the world for these products, the prices of those products are going to go up. Well, that's exactly what we had in the past 3 years. Just before all this recession hit us and we had all these problems, what was happening in many parts of the world is that the increasing prices of commodities, as they are called. What are commodities? What's the definition of commodity? We talk about commodities. What is a commodity?
House?
Ah, really? Why? It's not okay, but why?
I don't know, you say house, but I don't know what is the definition.
Can you move a house between Mexico and the United States? How easy would it be to bring your house and sell it in the United States?
You can, but
You can in an indirect fashion,
yes.
but you cannot really mobilize the house. So commodities in many ways is really the products that you can move around very quickly, okay?
Okay.
And the term commodity now has been used, or it's being used all the time for really materials which are in the primary sector of the consumption, okay? Now, you also have as a commodity oil, you have as a commodity apples, you have as a commodity corn,
Right.
wheat, all these things. All these are commodities in a generic term. All of these are going to be demanded, consumed more and more by the middle class, directly and indirectly, because we use sorghum for what? Have you ever eaten sorghum? Sorghum? Soya? Have you eaten soya? Is it good? Why is it that we don't eat it more?
Sorry?
Why is it that we don't eat it more in Mexico?
Well, because we are not used to be eating other things.
How do we eat sorghum in Mexico?
I don't know, we prefer like milk or maybe substitution of meat.
But mostly, did you say right now the word?
Milk.
And milk and substitution, how do you say? Meat. Because what happens is this is the primary input in the feeding of cattle. And therefore what happens is, if you are going to eat more meat, the cows are going to be eating more sorghum, and therefore you're going to have a larger demand of sorghum in the world, indirectly. When do we start eating meat? How many times do we eat meat a week?
2, 3.
Every day. No, you do eat fish sometimes? No? Every day? No? But think about this. If we were low-income consumers, how many times will we eat meat a week? And if we're a little bit lower than that, maybe never, okay? So one of the things that we are saying right now is, as people get more income, as they really reach the level of middle class, their taste changes and they start eating more meat. as they start eating more meat, they immediately force the cows to have more cows, if you want more cattle in the world, and to have more cattle in the world means they have to eat more sorghum. And so the price of sorghum is going to increase because of the demand of meat. All this indirect connection, we don't have to learn about it, but basically what we're saying is, given the size of the American economy right now, they have been the main drivers of growth in the world. Because they have an open economy, they have really gone into the world economy and become a major engine of growth for many, many countries. As we look at it far before and we move to Asia, one of the things that we have to realize is if the Asian countries really come to become middle class, the demand for many products is going to be increased several times. As they increase several times, the price of commodities in particular are going to be growing fast. That happened to a country called Brazil. That happened to a country called Argentina. That happened to the countries in South America. What is it that happened? What happened was, all of a sudden, they had a boom. All of a sudden, the products that they had, which were exported in a certain fashion with a certain price, were in high demand in the world. Because the Chinese consumers got into the market, because more Indian consumers got into the market, and that increased the demand for many of the products that these people were producing. Specifically corn, wheat, sorghum. So what we have seen in the past 5 years in countries like Brazil is what is called a commodity boom. A commodity boom which has been created by the demand of the products that they have. These are primary products. These are not industrialized products. And so all of a sudden the Brazilians, the Argentinians, many of the countries in the South found out something that they hadn't realized before. Because they were in the world trade and because there was a demand for the product, all of a sudden they became strong exporters, okay? Strong exporters of what?
Commodities.
Okay. Wheat, sorghum, corn in some cases. Basically, what is called primary products.
Beans? Beans?
Beans, probably. Yeah. And so as you see the soybeans, okay, particular. So as you see these things, one of the things that you're facing all of a sudden is you are a country, and all of a sudden this demand happens. If that demand happens, all of a sudden you have a lot of money because there is something called TOT, and that changed. What is TOT? What is TOT? No? No. Who knows what's TOT? I know what it is. Obviously, I can't prepare. This is called terms of trade. Okay. Terms of trade. And this is an important element of what we're really seeing. Because what it implies is, this is the ratio between the price of my exports and the price of my imports. Okay? If I have this situation right now, and I'm going to say that price of exports is 1, price of imports is 1. Okay? My ratio in this case is 1. All of a sudden, because we have this extraordinary demand coming into the market, the price of my exports goes to 2, but my price of imports remains in 1. My terms of trade have benefited me right now. This is the terms in which I trade with the world. Am I producing more? No. But am I getting more money for what I produce?
Yeah.
Yes. And therefore, all of a sudden I have wealth increase. But did it increase because I did anything? No. It increased because the worldwide demand for my product increased and the price increased. Sorry.
I didn't understand why the production didn't increase.
Because if it is day one, and I have 100 kilos of soybeans, and it's day two, it will be very difficult that it were more than 100. Okay? Because what I have thought is, I can only sell 100. Because that's really what's important to me is, at $1 a kilo, all I want to produce is 100. Yeah? All of a sudden the market comes to me and says, two. Well, at that moment, the moment that the market says to me two, my 100 kilos doesn't give me 100 pesos, it will give me now 200 pesos. I am richer. As a result of that, I understand that there is a higher demand and I start producing more. So I start investing, and it will take a while for my production to go from 100 to 120 or whatever. Okay? So there is a dynamic aspect and there is a static aspect. In the static aspect, the great thing for me is if international prices change in my favor, terms of trade change in my favor, then I am richer even though I still do exactly the same things. Okay? Let's suppose that you are a graduate in business and you are the only one speaking Chinese. Okay? And all of a sudden, the Chinese are important. They will get zero money extra. You will get a tremendous, attractive salary because everybody wants you because you are the only one who will be able to speak Chinese. Okay? That was the role of the Malinche during the conquest. Okay? She would speak and translate for the Spaniards. It was very important. But did you do anything extra? I mean, I know you took a long time to learn Chinese, that's fine. But once you already have it, did you do anything extra at that point? No. It's just that all of a sudden it became important. Whereas before it was not important, now it is important. Think about Chinese 50 years ago. If you walk to someone 50 years ago and you tell them, you have to learn Chinese, they would just look at you, yeah, sure. So what was important at that time? English. English remains important. That's why now many people speak English. Because it remains the lingua franca. Okay? That's the one that we want to speak. But as China becomes more important, maybe Chinese will be interesting. Okay, but that takes a tremendous effort. But if I'm already producing soybeans and the price already goes up, I'm going to be richer without doing anything at all. I'm just going to be richer because the price increased. Why did the price increase? Because we never expected the demand that happened. As the middle class increases, the prices will increase. And therefore, at the beginning, the terms of trade will go in my favor. As the terms of trade go in my favor, I become richer. As I become richer, that will change all aspects of strategic business decisions in the country. Do you see the relationship? It makes a role for economics in the world.
But when that happens, it doesn't the gap between rich and poor opens more, and then maybe you're growing.
If you're rich, are you worried about it? No, the point I'm making to you, I'm serious. I know it sounds like a joke, but the point I'm making to you is, if all of a sudden you have the terms of trade in your favor as a nation, do you really worry about that? In the long run, yes. In the short run, no. Okay. So think about what happened in Brazil in the past 5-8 years. Think about what happened in Argentina. What they did is they really spent all the profits they got from this in consumption. Yes. The situation inside the country changed. Yes. Because the government has more money now to make programs available to the people. But if the prices turn around, they're going back to where they started. And many of these programs, therefore, won't be competitive anymore. That's the reason why you have to be very careful about what the government politics and policies are. Two different things, okay? Politics and policies. From the politics will come the policies. From the policies will come the environment that we're going to be operating under. Yeah.
What are the politics right now in Mexico for enjoyment of trade?
I think right now what you have seen for the past 15 years, 3 years at the end of Cedillo, 12 years in the past administrations, and the 2 months that we have with this government, is basically a very consistent macro policy, where what you want to have is more and more competitive companies by providing the right environment in terms of the pricing relationships that they are facing. Okay? So the companies in Mexico, because we have an open economy in many ways, have to be competitive. Otherwise, they will not survive. Whereas if you go to Brazil, what you will find out is that the industrial policy they followed was an industrial policy where they will be protecting their own companies. And by protecting their own companies, what they did is they really created more inefficient companies than efficient companies in that country. Once you can subsidize that through the change in terms of trade, you are able to have growth in that economy. Once the terms of trade like happened last year turn back and switch back to the original situation, you don't have the resources, and therefore you're facing what they are facing right now, where the growth is only 1%, 1.5%. Our growth is only 4%. Now, politics in Mexico have become cleaner. And by cleaner, I don't mean that they don't clean in the sense that they understand now, and by all meaning all the important political parties, that they have to go in the same direction and do the kind of reforms that this country requires to make more efficient, even more efficient, the companies that we have. Okay. Second question is, the structural force behind this large consumption was the middle class. So the key element that I'm going to be pushing to you is, middle class is very important. And one of the things that is happening in the world is, how do I define the middle class? Well, it is, as this guy says, an ambiguous social classification. This is coming from this document, okay? Broadly reflecting the ability to lead a comfortable life. The middle class usually enjoy stable housing, healthcare, education opportunities including college for their children, reasonable retirement and job security, and discretionary income that can be spent on vacation and leisure pursuits. And then it refers to a person called Juliet Shore. She has argued that it's a new consumerism that defines the middle class, a constant upscaling of lifestyle norms, and the perverseness of conspicuous status goods and competition for acquiring them. So basically the message that people are sending is, as we keep changing, we start buying things that are not really necessary. But you have these jeans that you wear. They're full of holes and you still wear them.
Is there a positive or a negative forecast for Africa and its middle class?
Depends. It's fascinating. Africa is a fascinating region, okay? I'm going to send you a document that came from McKinsey. Okay? McKinsey just made a study about the African, and they call it the rising line. And the forecast of McKinsey and company is that you will see Africa growing very fast because they finally put together, in many of the countries, not all of them, in many of the countries, all the elements of the right policies. And therefore you have a rising middle class in many of these countries. And they mentioned South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, even with all the problems, etc. The biggest problem of Africa is what we call the tribalization of the region. Okay? As long as you have this difficult political environment where they really don't reach an agreement for stable governments, then you're subject to the changes of government and the crisis that will bring. And that could destroy a middle class, because what it will do is destroys the institutional framework under which you can operate. Okay? So the key question for Africa is, have they grown enough now to understand that they cannot continue to fight each other, as is happening right now in Mali? If that happens, Africa has a tremendous potential. In addition, because of the result, because the population is growing fast. Now this goes counter to what we were saying. When I was working at the World Bank, we were talking about Africa being the 2 mile region of the world. Now remember, Africa in the definition is what's called sub-Saharan Africa, okay? From the Sahara down. Why? Because what we saw was problems of health. At the time, AIDS was a major impact. And the projection of growth of population of Africa at the time was a diminution of population, not a growth, because of the AIDS phenomenon. Now this is being controlled now, population keeps growing. These are regions that could grow very fast in population, and if they have the right policies, they can also grow very fast in terms of the middle class that will be becoming the center of the country. So all eyes are turning to Asia, specifically to China, India, and all this that will be the next global consumers. And let me show you something quickly. Remember, I will be sending you these things, okay? Definitions and importance. If you look at the size of the middle class by regions, you have millions of people and global share. North America, 338, 18%, 333, 10%, 332, 7%. Europe, 36%, 22%, 14%. And then Central and South America, this is us, 10, 8, 6%. Asia Pacific, 28, 54, 66. Sub-Saharan Africa, 2, 2, 2. Okay. Middle East and North Africa, 6, 5, 5. That's our population, okay? This is the size of the middle class that will be expected for almost 5 million people by the year 2050. And so you can see how this moves. You can see how it will move the poor, the rich, and the middle class. These are the rich. This is the middle class, this is the poor. So what people are projecting is that if policies continue the way they are right now, by the year 2030, you will have larger middle class than the poor, but you still have a large number of poor in the world, okay? So you have to be careful about that. Yes, there's going to be poverty in the world, yes. It's going to change. So here you have the potential, okay, in terms of the middle class and the consumption of the middle class and what you can see. And you can see here what would be the total middle class consumption in the top 10 countries. Look at this country. It's called Mexico, okay? But there's something I want to let you understand. Look at Mexico. Okay? We are right now, this is 2009, okay? We are right now the 9th largest economy in terms of middle class. This is something you have to understand, I think. I find this fascinating. Mexicans do not understand how important Mexico is. Mexico is now the 9th largest country. By the year 2020, we continue the growth that we are. We're going to be above the United Kingdom, okay? And if we keep working as we are, we're going to be on top of Brazil and France. The United Kingdom is no longer there. This is the importance of the market of Mexico. Mexico is not a small player. It's not a small player in the world economy. Mexico is one of the most important countries in the world economy. Whatever projection you look at, with all the failures that you may be having in the future in terms of what happened, Mexico is within the 10 to 15 countries that will be important in the world. You have to understand that. In particular you, because you are in international business. This is a large market for the world. We are one of the most important markets for many companies. Many global companies are very interested in coming to Mexico because this is a very important market for them. And when you look at the projections of middle class, you can see that Mexico is always there. We may be wrong, and maybe we're not the 8th, maybe we're the 10th. I don't know. Maybe we are the 4th. Depends what we do. That's a different story, that's a different class. But in terms of what you can see here is Mexico, Mexico, Mexico. So whatever you see, you can see the projections. And of course, what you can see all the time is the United States, United States, United States, and then you see India and China. Message which is very important for you. If you are somewhere between 20 and 24, okay, What you're going to be looking at is 2030. This is how many years from now? How old are you going to be then? By the time that you're there, you have been working for a while. Your life implies the following. Mexico is going to be an important country, but at the same time, the United States will remain one of the major players in your lifetime. How many South American countries you see there? Brazil. Okay. Brazil. Where should be the focus of our foreign policy, business policy as a country? United States or South America? Okay. Well, they're going to be fighting with our world. Which is going to be fun. So, this is the question for you. What will be the market and what will be the product of your company in the year 2020? What do you expect your market to be? What do you expect to do when you finish your degree? Are you going to open your own business? Okay. Those of you who will open your own business, what markets will be your normal markets to look at?
Middle class?
The middle class. Now think about what country?
Mexico?
Okay. And if you want to go out,
United States.
United States.
Spain.
Okay. So in many ways what you're facing now is no longer is a regional, local market that I'm going to be looking at. When I finish my degree, I will be looking at the international market. And the reason why that's important is, regardless of whether my company produces for Mexico or not, it will be competing with companies from all over the world. And therefore I have to look at the overall markets and the product. Now, how does my product have to be for me to be able to sell it? Bad quality or good quality?
Low
Price.
Right? Okay, and therefore, if I want to be competitive, regardless of whether I stay in Mexico or I move outside, regardless of whether my company sells in Mexico or sells somewhere else, the company has to have two things in mind. The first one is, the market I'm competing is not Mexico, it's the world. And the reason why it's the world is because I can either sell any place in the world, but also anybody can sell in my market coming from outside the world. And so the market of relevance means the world in that context. Okay. And the product I have has to be competitive by international standards. And has to face and has to pass the test of one.
In order to become exported to the country.
Okay. I have to be as competitive as being able to export to the country. But I may only sell in Mexico, that's fine. But you have to recognize one thing. Someone is going to export in front of you. So the Virgencita de Guadalupe is now being produced where?
China.
And why do we get upset? Because it's our Virgencita. So what? All I want is a little thing that will be nice, good looking, and I can venerate if I do that at the lowest possible price. So if the Chinese are the ones who supply that into my market, why should I go and buy a copy which is more expensive or that is not as nice as that? You don't have those hang-ups, okay? Because I'm assuming that you are students of international business, you don't have those hang-ups. But in other areas, you will find out, okay?
What do you think is going to happen with the local market?
Well, you don't have a local market anymore,
Okay.
okay? There's only one place where you can have a local market, and that is, you can open a small business, and you can then open that small business for domestic consumption, regional consumption, local consumption. Okay, what do you think about when you say that? You're up in shop. What? What are you going to be producing?
I don't know.
Oh, we have to start thinking. We're going to be out of this school pretty soon. So a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
It's the easiest thing.
Okay,
Yeah?
okay, restaurant.
Okay, in what?
Mexican food.
Mexican food.
Okay.
Okay. No one is competing with you from outside the world?
Yes.
Who? Have you ever gone to Chili's? Is that Mexican food?
No.
Okay.
Tex-Mex.
But it is not the food that is becoming the Mexican food. When you go to the United States, you go to a normal restaurant and you go to Chili's. I suppose everybody here has gone to Chili's, yeah? They have nice margaritas, but other than that. Even the margaritas are not the original ones, okay? But they're good. So the question is, even that you're going to be facing competition in your own market, okay? So someone will come like Chili's or like Applebee's or whatever name you want to use, and they're going to have a franchise, and the franchise then is going to establish on the side of your restaurant, and it will compete with you in your own market. So you really be sure that you have the best Mexican food for the Mexican taste. Okay? And so, what I'm trying to say to you is, yes, you can open a small business, you can do many things, but you will still be facing international competition in many ways. Because what you have now is consumers in Mexico who have a broad choice of where they want to go, what they want to buy. What is the reason for that? That we open our economy. Okay? So this is what you're going to be facing. Is consumption the whole story? No. As we move into outsourcing, we are also shifting to something else. When we're talking about trade, when we're talking about globalization, we are not only talking about final products. Okay? What we're talking about is the fact that now a company can use the world for a factory. Because what they can do is they can order products somewhere else, or they can establish themselves and do the outsourcing somewhere else. So who is answering the phone calls for all of us who have a Visa card and have a problem, and we call this 800 number in the United States?
In India.
Most of the people that we're going to be getting on the other end of the call is going to be a person in India. And that person will solve the problem for us in the United States or in Europe or any place in the world that we have. Outsourcing has become important. And what really means outsourcing is production linkages, because that's really what's very important. There is no reason now to produce everything in one single place. What you do is you open your economy, and that allows you to bring inputs from many places of the world. And so you can get the best price and the lowest possible cost. I'm in the consulting board of Bombardier, which is one of the largest airplane companies in the world. Okay? And Bombardier has no longer Canada as the only place where they will produce and sell planes. And what they do, which is fantastic, is they come to Mexico, they set up shop in Querétaro, and as we are in Querétaro, we produce in Querétaro now part of the fuselage of the plane. And so you have to go and look at these things to understand what they're talking about. The wings are made in Mexico, the fuselage, part of it is made in Mexico, and then it's being sent like that to be finally assembled either in the United States or in Canada. As they did that, they learned that it would be cheaper, easier, and as good to produce the plane in Mexico. So they're beginning to do exactly the opposite. What they're beginning to do more and more now is they are now bringing the fuselage and some parts from Canada and the United States, and they're going to be assembling the plane in Querétaro. As they do that, you are going to have Learjets. That's one of the trademarks of the company that will be produced and assembled in Mexico and sold and exported into the United States that way. That's nice, no?
The company is Bombardier.
Bombardier. Who's the main competitor of Bombardier? Embraer. That's a Brazilian company. Okay? Production linkages is part of the story. Consumption, production, both are no longer one single issue, one single country, one single place. I can do many things. Let me show you some examples. Boeing and 787. Now let me see if I don't miss now what I was supposed to be doing. With all the problems of 787, where is it that is being made? Oh, oops. Okay, in Boeing commercial airplanes, the main location is the state of Washington, and they will do the airplane development, the integration, the final assembly, and the program leadership. But Alenia Aeronautica in Italy will produce your horizontal stabilizer at the center fuselage. And then Boeing Charleston, which will do the rest of the fuselage in South Carolina. And then Boeing Fabrication in Washington, Canada, and Australia will do the vertical tail assembly, the movable trailing edges, the wing-to-body bearing interiors. And then, in Japan, Fuji will be making the center wing box, the integration of the center wing box with the main landing, blah, blah, blah. Mitsubishi wing box, Hamilton's on track in Connecticut will do the auxiliary power, blah, blah, blah. And if you keep looking, you could see in the United Kingdom, North Carolina, France, Washington State, United Kingdom, Ohio, Washington, New York, North Carolina, Washington, France, Ohio, blah, blah, blah. So, tell me one thing. Is this an American plane? Okay. One of the things that's important, what I've just shown you, is what is called rules of origin. Because what it implies now is, honestly, I have no idea where this plane was produced. I know where it was finally assembled, because it will be finally assembled in Washington State, in the United States. But if I have all these parts coming from all different places, then is this a Mexican plane, a French plane, an Italian plane? It is a worldwide, globalized plane.
But now most of the planes are made like this, like for example, I don't know, Burberry things are made in China.
Exactly. So when you get upset and you say, these Chinese are really conquering the world, the question behind that is, are really the Chinese or are the people who are making foreign investment in China, which are from France, from the United States, from Japan, from many places? So if the product may be finalized and someone know that in China, but is it really Chinese? Okay. So what I want to bring to your attention is, we're going to get into international trade agreements. One of the big questions there is what's called the rules of origin. Where was originated the plane or the thing, so that it can be sold in certain markets with certain advantages given to those products. A product like this has a lot of problems in addition. Okay? One of the reasons why Boeing 787 is having so much difficulties is because it was assembled this way. So I cannot control quality the same way if I have it here and if I have it all over the place. Okay. Education is important. That's the reason why this university has only one campus. We only have one. Because then we can control quality. I cannot control quality in a campus if I have a campus in Mexico City, another one in 14 class floors, and I have 31. I have no idea what's happening in the other 30. Okay. But what I can see here is a different story. This is pieces that I can put together. Even then, Boeing has been facing tremendous problems because of the fact that they went into this arrangement to produce 787. 787s are having lots of problems. Part of it is because something fails here, something fails there, because the company in China, in France, in this didn't use the same standards I was hoping they would. So one of the problems that we're facing is, yes, everybody now is using outsourcing. And what we have to be very careful as a business strategy is the quality of the inputs that I'm getting have to be up to standard. Boeing is facing that problem, but Boeing is one example of why we cannot talk about one plane, one country. Okay. But Boeing is not the only one, okay? We also have The production of hard disks, the ones that you use in many computers, many of them are produced in Thailand, are consumed in the United States. And so the question is this really a product? And it's very difficult to say. Because Thailand does these things, but Malaysia does these others, Singapore does this other, Indonesia does that, Philippines do that, Taiwan that, Hong Kong that, China that, and even in the United States do some of it. Finally, in Mexico, we do the heads. And when the product is finally assembled in Thailand and exported, it has inputs from all over these countries. This is a hard disk. The world is different. Your business strategy has to recognize that. You have to know what the final effect of an individual country will be on the rest. So if I enter into recession in the United States, I may be given a hell of a time to Thailand, to Hong Kong, to Taiwan, to China, to Philippines, to Indonesia, to Singapore, to Malaysia. Not because they are exporting the computer, but because they are exporting parts of that computer. So the impact felt in one country is going to be felt in many countries, not only because of the reduction in the demand of the final product, but because of the demand of that final product and the impact of that on the demand of inputs, given that we now moved in this day.
But also, I think that product has a problem because the cost of moving all the pieces around and all the oil and all the pollution that creates is not internalized in the cost. So maybe it's cheaper, but for the global society we're talking about in the global market, it's not good. And I'm not saying that fair trade is not good, but it's not the panacea. So
That's fine. No problem with that.
So we can assume that the outsourcing is going to end because the oil is going to be more expensive.
Not necessarily.
How do you do to...
What you have to take into account once you are working into a business company is what will be the impact of what's called transportation cost. Okay? So the reason why Mexico is very competitive right now in TVs in the world is because we have this proximity with the United States. Okay? The distance between Mexico and the United States is about one bridge. That's it. Okay? You cross the bridge, you're on the other side. Now, having said that, what it implies then is if I set up fabrics, plants all over the northern part of Mexico, which is exactly what happened with the maquila industry, then I don't have any transportation cost because basically I'm into the United States already. So all I do is I just cross the bridge and I'm on the other side. Okay? Now, if I do that, I'm reducing the transportation cost. Why is it that I can then send a TV about this size from China and be more competitive than the ones that we produce in Mexico? Because there is going to be a difference in terms of the salary and many other aspects of cost in the production process. Why is it that I cannot beat Mexico when I am talking of larger than 40 inches screens compared to China? Because the transportation cost is very expensive. Okay? And so Mexico is dominating the United States market in every large screen. By large I mean more than 40 inches. The Chinese are dominating still less than 40 inches market in the United States. Because transportation cost allows them, so lower transportation cost allows them to reach that level. Okay? So transportation is very important, and then the point that she's making is interesting. And it's a question for business community how responsible you want to be, which is, because I'm producing in many places, and I'm using more transportation, I may be polluting the world more than we should, and we are not internalizing those costs as global society. Okay, I'm a business enterprise, and I may say, tough luck. But your point is well taken. There is a problem that will be facing the world in the future, okay? Which is, can we really continue to do that in a scale that really will not recognize implicit externalities, as we call them? And that's a question that will have to be answered by Not by the business firms, but by the governments. So again, in the overall environment that you'll be facing as a business person, one of the things you have to recognize is, sooner or later, if this really creates that kind of a problem, governments will have to respond to that problematic. That's why I asked you at the beginning of the course, do you know what's happening in Beijing right now? Because the problem that the Chinese are facing right now, serious problem, is a health hazard for their population, given the levels of pollution they have in Beijing. Why do they have those levels of pollution? Because they are using coal in large amounts, and they are not really using the kind of stacks that will eliminate, filters that will eliminate the pollution. So they were able to take advantage of using that technology and making them cheaper, but now they are finding out that it was a different cost, that the cost is not really high. Okay, so what will happen to China now is they will have to use other kind of anti-pollutant type of equipment, and as they do that, they will have rising costs, and as that happens, I will be more competitive in those products. Yeah.
I was wondering how then it's gonna work, like the growing in the middle class, like, because I think outsourcing can cause like job crisis as well, and also with the pollution and the health standard. So if all these things are like coming up, how is the middle class gonna grow then?
Okay. Remember the joke I made about Shanghai or goodbye? That's what's going to happen. Right? It's Shanghai or goodbye, meaning by that. If it's going to be cheaper to do it in Shanghai, then you have to start thinking very seriously. Whether you move to Shanghai and you're middle class in Shanghai, or you remain in Mexico unemployed, and therefore you're not going to be middle class. So the key question is something that is called the convergence theory in free trade theory, which is, over the long run, if you really put together all these things and you have a truly free trade, what will happen is that you will converge to the same level of salaries all over the world, to the same level of costs all over the world. Okay? Now this is obviously theoretically true. It doesn't happen. Why is it that doesn't happen? We're going to get into that in the next class. Okay? But that's exactly the problem that you're going to face. And then what's going to happen is you're going to say, wait, this is my job. It's different than what it was her job. I mean, her job, please send it to China. Make things cheaper. But my job, no way.
Yeah, because I think now also it's gonna be harder for us to find a job or something because outsourcing, I mean, a lot of the companies are gonna try to hire, I don't know, people or like get some things from, not from Mexico or other places where everything is cheaper. So like, what can we do or how is it gonna
What is going to be
work?
more difficult for you is to remain in one country. Getting a job is not going to be difficult. In fact, I won't be surprised if you don't have a job very quickly. The biggest problem is going to be that that job doesn't necessarily has to be where I would like to be. Okay? So it's going to become a question of how globalized are you as a person? And that's a difficult question because none of us really answer the question until it happens. Okay? If I were to tell you that I have lived in 7 different places, then you will understand what is the difference between being globalized and not being globalized. The other problem you're going to face in your life is this is not your only diploma. You will have to keep changing. Otherwise, you're going to be outdated very quickly.
I really just forget what I'm going to ask.
Okay, we have to go because I understand that this is 1 hour 15 minutes. So we will take back the question right here. Now, who hasn't put his name or her name on this list? Everybody there? This is the attendance list, okay? Okay, we'll see you Friday, okay?